Right, good evening, and a big thank you to Tim Kirby for coming on. Tony does send his apologies. So, with that, I'm going to pass it over to Tim and let Tim explain everything to us. Over to you, Tim.
Well, thank you. Okay, well, it's lovely to be with you this evening. Thank you for inviting me. My name's Tim Kirby GW4VXE. You might have come across some of the articles in Radcom and PW, but don't hold that against me. So what this evening's talk is going to be about is sort of the process that we went through and still ongoing of moving from sort of a fairly urban environment in Oxfordshire out to here in West Wales and starting to build a station all over again, and some of the fun and games that I've had. And I was going to say some of the lessons I've learned, but that sounds horribly corporate and I'm not going to go there. So anyway, what I'm going to try doing is sharing my screen. Hopefully, you're going to be able. Yes.
Yes.
Good. Let's just close that down because that's not what I. Oh no, I don't want to. I don't want to share that. I was wondering why it didn't look quite right. Right, let's try that one. There we are. That's better. Welcome to Wales. And actually, that picture, that sunset, I took that about half an hour ago. So besides it being a lovely picture, I just wanted to give you a little bit of an idea of the takeoff from here to the west. Anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. So the talk this evening is entitled "Starting Again from Another Country." And what it's going to be about is moving house, a bit of a change of lifestyle, which I'll tell you a bit about. And of course, there's a bit of amateur radio in mind as well, as you'll see. One of the things I wanted to share with you was some ideas about getting on the air quickly from somewhere new. So that might be applicable perhaps if you're moving house, but it might be applicable in the same way if you're newly licensed or something like that. So hope there'll be some ideas for you there. Tell you a little bit about how things have gone so far, what some of my future plans are, and it's not all about radio. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the other stuff that we do here as well, which hopefully you might find interesting. So yeah, it wasn't just a move, but a change of lifestyle that was called for. For goodness knows how many years I've been doing IT in fairly large corporate places, and to be blunt, I got fed up with it. It got to the stage where my background is software development, and I love making things work. But my job had got very much that it was sort of more paperwork and so on. So work wasn't too much fun anymore, and over quite a few years I've been thinking about what can I do about this, and I'm sure some of you have been through that cycle and wonder how to make it work. The kids have flown the nest, so that kind of made it easier, and responsibilities to our parents had lessened a little bit. So we could, in theory, think about moving from where we were, but there's lots to think about. There's the whole money thing, and can I afford not to work anymore? And you can imagine the sleepless nights, can't you? Well, I don't think I lost any sleep, but you wonder how it's going to work. But we started to realise that perhaps we could do something, and that something would be possible, and fortunately, Julie, my wife, who some of you know, was very supportive about that. So where should we move to? Well, and Peter will smile about this. It boiled down to a choice between southwest England and Wales. I love Cornwall and Devon very much as well. I spent a lot of happy time down in Cornwall in particular. My parents lived there for 25 years, so you know one of the places that we thought about going was to Cornwall. The other choice for us was Wales, and you know we spent a lot of time thinking about this, but we, as you know, we chose Wales. Julie's part Welsh. Her grandmother came from Monmouthshire, so only just over the border, but we're claiming the Welsh heritage anyway. And we both feel very much at home here. It's West Wales is a place that we both spent a huge amount of time over the years, both on holiday and seeing friends and so on. And one of the things that we realised about being in Wales that both of us have family in Gloucestershire, and it's kind of easier to get back to Gloucestershire from here than from Cornwall. So that was one of the decisions. And I've put down at the end, everyone knows that a GW prefix is worth 3 dB output at least. It's been scientifically proven. So that was a really big factor for me. I've always enjoyed operating from GW and done quite a lot of that over the years, both on HF and VHF. So, you know, we wanted to find the right place, and we made a list of everything that was important to us when we moved. So, you know, flexible living space, could people come and stay with us? You know, plenty of rooms that we could, you know, sort of go off and do different things. Safe for our cats, very important to us. Room to grow veg, and we'll talk a little bit about that. You'll start to smile about these last couple of ones. Sea views, please. Well, I do love the sea. I love seeing the sea. From about the age of, I don't know, 9 or 10, I could never really understand why some people could live by the sea, but I couldn't. And so, you know, I really wanted to live by the sea. But far-reaching views, it's a lovely phrase. If you ever want to tell your partner who may not be into radio, I don't know, but if you use the phrase far-reaching views, that translates into good takeoff. So wanted somewhere with far-reaching views. Well, we did some what we call weird shit stuff around this. So we wanted to visualize, you know, the sort of place that we would have, and you know, we worked with some of our friends with some esoteric interests on that. Nothing horrible, I promise you. But curiously, it seemed to work, and that was very interesting. So I think it was, we were going on holiday anyway, and we didn't mean to find a house, but you know how it is. We just ended up coming past. We looked at another house just to see how much our money would buy, and that wasn't quite the right place for us. But Julie looked on the website of the same estate agent, and this place, Parsonage House, was on there. So we thought, well, we could just kind of wander by and see what it looked like. Well, actually, what you don't know is that this isn't exactly the sort of place you wander by. It's up a track, a third of a mile out of the village. So you don't exactly walk up it, but the track is a bridleway. So we thought, well, we could walk up there a little way and see what it looks like, and it looked quite interesting. And actually, we thought, even if the house is rubbish, you know, the location is a fantastic one. So we arranged to have a viewing the next day, and we loved it. It was really good. Problem was, of course, we hadn't sold our house back in Longworth in Oxfordshire, and I won't bore you with the details of that, but it did take a very long time. It was painful, and at one point we actually lost this property here. It sold to somebody else, but in a rather strange turn of events, that sale fell through just as we'd sold our house. It was literally within about 24 hours of that, and we were able to make a successful offer on this place. So that was really really lucky. So where are we talking about? I guess most of you probably know where Pembrokeshire is, but in case you don't, there's West Wales, and the pointer there is where we are. A little bit of a zoom in there on where we are in a little village called St Nicholas, about 4.5 miles southwest of Fishguard. Well, of course, while I was waiting for everything to fall into place, and believe me, we had plenty of time. I was looking on the OS maps and some of the path predictors and so on to try and get an idea of what the takeoff would be. And there were lots of things I wanted to do from a perfect sort of radio location. I wanted to work Cape Verde on VHF, D4VHF. You've probably read about them on 2 meters and on 70 SEMS. Been quite active, although sadly not this year. They've suffered some storm damage down there, and of course with COVID, they haven't been able to get out there to repair it. But hopefully they'll be back again before too long. But anyway, I wanted to work Cape Verde on VHF. That was one of my targets. 6 meters I was really interested in, and I had hopes that it would be quite decent to the west from here. The east, I realised that was always going to be quite difficult with the Preseli Hills to the east of us, a reasonably substantial hill, a range of hills, sort of 10 miles or so away, back towards England and the continent. And of course, there's some local obstructions as well. But I spent a lot of time looking at the map, thinking, oh, is this going to work? Might this work or whatever? So that was quite a bit of fun, and it's interesting to see how that sort of translates into reality. Well, packing up back in Oxfordshire, I didn't have a huge station there. It did all right, but actually most of the time and most of what I did from there using on 2 meters, 6 meters, and 70 SEMS, I was actually using a V2000 vertical on FT8, and that had worked surprisingly well. I worked some quite decent stuff on 2 meters. So I was very lucky, and made 1 or 2 interesting contacts on 6 as well. So I left that up. Ideally I wanted to leave the aerial up until the last minute. The last weekend before we moved or something like that. But actually, although we were asking the people that were buying our house to have something like a month's notice of when we were going to move, I think we ended up with 6 days notice. You guys, I'm sure you've moved house and you know how all this works. So I realised I wasn't going to be able to do that. So Justin G4TSH, who many of you may know, very kindly went up the ladders and took some aerials down. Not only that, but 2 meter and 70 SEMS beam as well. So we packed up, and then moving day arrived. We actually got a Welsh removal company to help us move. That was one of the reasons for that. Is where we are. I have mentioned track. We're in quite a hard to get to place, and you can't get a huge moving van up the track. And we're a little bit concerned that some of the sort of more national removal companies wouldn't be quite so comfortable with that. So we got a local removal company to help us, and I knew we were onto the right place when I phoned them up and introduced myself and said where we were working to, and the guy said, "Oh yeah, I know the house. That's fine. Yeah, we can do that." Yeah, we were really happy when the removal van turned up, and you can see some of the aerials waiting out there on the lawn to go into the van. They did all fit, even the 30-meter vertical. So that was good, and it was fun. Later that day, we overtook the removal lorry with all our possessions on the Severn crossing, it seemed strangely appropriate that we should do that. So that was lots of fun. So we moved from Oxfordshire to Pembrokeshire. Actually, this is a picture I took this morning, gives you a bit of an idea of where we are, the sort of environment we have. This is taken from the field behind the house, which we're lucky enough to own. The sheep aren't ours, they're a local farmers who grazes the field and looks after the hedges and all that sort of stuff for us. The house is actually that bit there. If you can see my mouse pointer, we do have some neighbours there, but quite lucky with plenty of space around us. There's a polytunnel there which we've put up this year, and I'll tell you a little bit about that very quickly later on. So that gives you a bit of an idea of the sort of location. So to give you an idea, I suppose I'm facing sort of southwest when I took that picture. West is out here across the sea, south is down here. So very lucky, we get some nice sunsets from here. I'd like to say that was the first day that we moved in, but it wasn't. Actually, that was a sunset with a storm approaching. I think it was a storm force 10 on its way in, and we're just starting to see some of the cloud system. But it was a gorgeous sunset that evening, and we are really lucky with the sunsets here. So we got all the stuff over here, and I was, of course, I was keen to. There was lots going on, moving into the house and getting things settled and so on. But it was nice to try and do a little bit on the radio as well. So of course, I was able to update my new address onto the Ofcom portal, so I was officially GW4VXE. So that was very exciting. And I think about the first thing I did, I found my very old ICOM IC740 HF rig and an ATU, and I think I had a reel of wire. So about 3 days in, I thought, well, I really ought to make a couple of contacts. So I just threw a reel of wire out of one of the upstairs windows and tuned up the bit of wire on 40 meters, which is always a good band for emergency QSOs, and worked Bud at AA3B on CW. So that was nice. It was it was kind of worrying. I didn't find the 40 meters was particularly quiet. I remember thinking that evening, possibly something to do with the fact that my antenna at that time was very close to the telephone wires and the DSL noise. So that was an interesting learning experience. I thought, right, I have to try and keep the HF antennas away from the telephone lines if I can. But of course, one of the great things about VHF and so on is that it's often quite easy to make QSOs from anywhere you are. And one of the articles I wrote years ago, I think it's for PW, was entitled VHF from Anywhere, and it was talking about how you could make VHF QSOs from, even a hole in the ground. Well, very obviously this isn't a hole in the ground, but I used the same sort of ideas. And if you can see the sky, you can make some satellite QSOs. So I got one of my handhelds out and the small portable Yagi that you can see, and started to make some FM satellite QSOs. And of course, what was absolutely fantastic compared to what I was used to was the low takeoff angles that I could work. Where I'd been in Longworth, if I was out in the back garden with the setup that you see there, because of trees and adjoining houses and so on, I was lucky if I could work a path lower than about 20 degrees or whatever. Well, from here, it turns out that I can actually make satellite QSOs when the satellite isn't even quite above the horizon, so it's negative elevation. But that's a little way in the future from these early days. But I was certainly very excited to make my first FM satellite QSOs across the Atlantic. And in case some of you haven't come across satellite working on some of the FM satellites, I'm particularly thinking about AO91 and AO92. They're 2 meters down, quite strong downlink, and 70 sems up. So you'll find that you can hear them quite easily with fairly simple equipment. We can talk about that a little bit more if you're interested later on. So yeah, that was getting started, but we moved in just before Christmas. It was 2019. And we moved in, I think it was the 6th of December. So, of course, there was a lot of focus on getting stuff in, and we were expecting people for Christmas, as you do, a couple of weeks after you've moved house. So there's a lot of focus on that. But I thought, well, it'd be quite interesting to try and get 2 meters FT8 going from here, because I was missing that as well. So what could I do? Well, the computer and the rig were all unpacked, so that was fine up in the shack. But I hadn't sort of drilled holes in the in in the walls, and the fairly thick walls here. So there was some stuff going on 2 meters, and I thought it would be interesting to try getting on. So I actually had one of the inflatable aerials that I had a chance to review. I don't know if you've seen them, but Tom GM3HNN from Air Antennas or Radio Geeks, I think he calls himself now, markets, and I had a 2 meter inflatable aerial. So I thought, oh well, I'll stick that up on a short post outside and drag the coax in through the window and see if I can make some QSOs. So worked a couple of local stations, which was nice. That wasn't too big a deal. And purely by luck, and this is really quite rare, as those of you who are interested in VHF propagation will know, there's a secondary sporadic E period in December. Most of us know about the sporadic E, which tends to start happening in, say, late April and runs till perhaps July, with most of the 2 meter openings generally between May and June-ish. It's not an absolute science. But there's also a secondary E season, which is in December, and generally it's all right for some 6 meter QSOs and so on. And just very occasionally it hits 2 meters in December, but I don't recall that happening many times over the years that I've been licensed. Well, of course, 2019, that's exactly what happens, and I was really rather surprised when I just had this very simple antenna outside, just a vertical about 50 watts, and found that there was some sporadic E into sort of around Poland, I think it was, and I was lucky enough to scrape a QSO there, I think, and heard a couple of other stations. So so that was a fun start. And actually, with the same setup, a few days later, there was a little bit of tropo going on 2 meters, and some people were working down to Cape Verde. Well, I was a bit disappointed that I couldn't hear Cape Verde on my vertical antenna. More of that later, I suppose. But I was very pleased to actually be able to work down to the Canary Islands using the aerial that you see. So that's about 2,800K from me. So pretty reasonable sort of distance. So I was quite excited by that, and thought, I think that's proving that the location is as good as I hoped it might be. So so that was fun. And shortly after, well, I think it was about March of 2020, the guys from the TX Factor came to have a chat. We'd been hoping to try and get together to have a chat before Julie and I left Longworth, but the timings didn't work out. So Bob and Nick came up and spent a day with us. Doing some filming, and if you haven't seen it, it's quite a fun episode. And dear Max the cat sat with us for much of the filming. He was quite a star, and it's lovely to see him here. It was a little bit bittersweet for me though, because actually Max was just starting to be a little bit poorly at that stage, and he died just before the TX Factor episode was aired. So I was a bit sniffly when I saw that. Anyway, it's nice to see his picture, and he shows up a little bit in some later slides as well. So yeah, we had a lot of fun with Bob and Nick there. So one of my first sort of proper antenna was a 2-meter beam. It was a little diamond antenna that Dave M0GIW had surplus to requirements and very kindly sent me, and I put that up on a short mast. The only problem was still getting the coax into the shaft, but Andy GW0KZG, who's about 5 miles away, was kind enough to bring his large drill around and resolve that problem. Well, with that small beam, I was really interested one night to hear a bunch of stations a bunch of decodes from the Azores. So that was interesting. Starting to get a few more things going, and got one of the V2000 verticals up on the house, which gave me 6 meters, 2 meters, and 70 sems. And as many of you know, I do, although where I was in Longworth, I was spending all my time on vertical polarization for FT8. I realised that being out here, a beam would be important as well. So I made sure I had a horizontal beam for 2 meters, FT8. But I do know that there's a number of stations who just operate on vertical, so I was quite interested to try the vertical antenna from out here on 2 meters, and that's worked out quite well. V2000 does 6 meters as well, and initially that worked out pretty decently, and for fairly sort of local sporadic, shall we say, around Europe and so on. Although I did work, I think it was PZ5RA on 6 meters with the vertical, which I was pretty excited about, and had some near misses with some Canadians and Americans as well. So that was good. Actually, curiously, a few months in, 6 meters started to affect the internet link. We have a wireless link up to a mast which gives us our internet connection, and a few months in, I don't know whether some corrosion had taken place. I don't think it's on my antenna because I'm not seeing any changes, but whether some salty water has got into the internet link box, I don't know. But it started to affect it, so I've been using different aerials for 6 meters. Peculiarly, in all of the sort of thinking about moving and how I wanted to operate from here, I concentrated completely on VHF and UHF and hadn't really thought about HF at all. And most of my VHF UHF operation is FT8, and I'm sure that's not everybody's cup of tea, and I respect that. That's fine. And one day I was thinking, you know what, I kind of miss HFCW. I quite like doing HFCW, and I thought, well, why don't I just sling a dipole up and see what I can work. And I had a SOTA beams linked dipole for 20 and 40 meters. So I just put that up at fairly minimal height in the back garden and sort of threaded the coax through. And of course, I picked a great weekend for it because it was the Commonwealth contest. Those of you that know the Commonwealth contest, it's quite a nice one. It's a CW contest, and it's open to stations who reside in the British Commonwealth. So there's VKZLs around, lots of VEs. Andy 5Z4VJ was on, so it was quite fun trying to make some of those QSOs on 20 and 40 meters. So so that was my first introduction to HF from here. Well, I suppose we got to about late April, and I think I mentioned I'd scraped QSO with PZ5RA on 6 meters on the vertical, and I thought, well, this is I'm clearly going to get more out of 6 meters if I put a beam up. So I put up a 4-element power beam on a fairly short pole. It does look very short there. In actual fact, the ground falls away in front of the antenna there. So so it's actually in reality somewhat higher than it seems. But
I think the answer to that one is probably no.
The antenna.
Even if they're just like, yeah, they'll do.
That is pockets.
Yeah.
So I almost instantly discovered that the world is very different here on 6 meters. Peter G8BCG will know this as well. But you know, any time between late April perhaps and July, if you stick the beam out across the sea and leave FT8 monitoring, then it's pretty certain every day something interesting will pop up at some time. It's quite incredible. And I started to realise, you know, something I'd never noticed before. Was during the summer, for example, there's usually a lunchtime opening on 6 meters as the sun rises in North America or the Caribbean, and you can usually work 1 or 2 stations then perhaps it'll go quiet for a little while, and then you might see something again in the evening. If conditions are really good, then you know, it'll just be open all the time. But absolutely fascinating to play with 6 meters from here. Well, what about the path down to D4? Well, of course, I put my 6 meter beam up and was starting to enjoy that. Julie and I were out for a walk. We were in the stage of Welsh lockdown when you couldn't drive anywhere, so you had to take your exercise walking from home, and we were starting to want to get a little bit further. So we actually were out on a walk up, it was about 3 or 4 miles to the north of us, up a hill called Gonfar, which has a lovely view from. It's just over the border into IO72. I'm in IO71. It's just over the border. And anyway, we'd gone for a wander up the hill to look at the view, and had a WhatsApp message from Andy GW4VXE saying, "Hey Tim, 2 meters is open to D4." Oh, okay, all right, thank you, thanks. And of course, you then start wondering how long the band's going to be open for. So we turned around, and got back to home, and of course my 6 meter beam was up, so promptly took that down, put the little beam that you saw earlier, the Diamond Yagi from Dave and 0GIW, put that up, and went on to 2 meters, beaming down to the southwest, and was really delighted to work D4VHF. So that was done. That was great. That was was quite easy, really. So I thought, fine, well, that's that done. I'll get the 6-meter beam back up. So I swapped the feeders back over and put the 2-meter vertical on back on the 2-meter port on the FT847, and went outside and put the 6-meter beam back up. Didn't take very long, so that was great. Came back inside, and there was there are a few more decodes of D4VHF on 2 meters, and of course I've been on the vertical antenna with rather than the beam. So it wasn't, signals weren't huge, but they were certainly there okay. I thought, so I was starting to hatch a plan. I was thinking, it'd be kind of fun to work D4VHF on the vertical, wouldn't it? So I waited for signals to peak up a little bit, which they did in the early evening as the sun started to go down, and the temperature over the sea cooled a little bit, and the signals from D4VHF came up a little bit, and gave them a bit of a tentative call, and was very pleased to work them on the vertical. So that was great. But what was even better was some of my locals who just got vertical antennas on 2 meters. I was saying, well, yeah, give them a call, and they were able to make the QSO as well. So that was fantastic. I have actually heard D4VHF on 70SEMs using the vertical as well. Unfortunately, we had visitors the evening that happened, so I wasn't in the shack. So that was a bit of a blow. But I have worked E8CXN on 70SEMs a couple of times on the vertical. So looking forward to a D4 QSO on 70SEMs. Don't care if I use a vertical or a beam, really, but so that's a little bit more about the path to D4. So that does work pretty well. 6 meters, I can't compete with Peter at all, but 6 meters is going pretty well after 2 seasons. I run about 85 watts from a barefoot FT847. I've got about 50 meters of coax between the shack and the beam. So probably not the most potent signal I could be on 6 meters, but even so, I seem to have had some reasonable QSOs. And you know, there are times when it's really very exciting indeed to hear the DX coming through, and I certainly heard an awful lot more than I've worked on some of the more extreme openings. But anyway, there's time. We'll get all that sorted out. So over the 2020 autumn winter season, I started playing a little bit of meteor scatter on 2 meters, which was you know, the first time I'd played meteor scatter in a very long time. We used to do CW meteor scatter with memory keys and tape recorders to slow it all down. Well, of course, it's changed completely now, and we use the WSJTX software, or WSJT to make some QSOs. So had some fun QSOs with Yuri UT1FG Maritime Mobile out in the Atlantic. That was nice on 2 meters. Lots of 2 meter FT8, of course, with one of the reliable means of propagation from here, even if there isn't much tropo, especially when there isn't a lockdown, is aircraft scatter. We have quite a lot of aircraft traffic coming over from Europe and from London out to Ireland and North America, so we get quite a bit of aircraft scatter. So you know, pointing a beam or having the vertical on 2 meters can give some quite nice scatter QSOs back into the east of the country, or maybe up into Scotland and so on. The 2 meter tropo path to the east has worked out better than I expected. I thought I'd really struggle with the hills, but actually it has proven possible to make some quite decent tropo QSOs on 2 meters. I think there must be some holes in the hills up to northern Germany and Sweden and Denmark and so on, and I've been quite pleased with some of the tropo QSOs. Not just so last winter, not just VHF. I started, having enjoyed playing around on HF a little bit more. I'm lucky enough to be able to put up a full-size 80-meter dipole, so got one of those up and enjoyed using that. Sometimes to listen to Tea Time Morse, by the way. I know I've called in and said hello to Bernard on at least a couple of occasions, and I know I've worked Evan on 80-meter CW as well. So so that's been fun. So it's been nice having an 80-meter dipole to work friends all over the country, as well as sometimes playing. Working a little bit of DX. Also got quite an ancient HF6V vertical, which I've had since the 1980s. So that's back up in the field with a semi-reasonable radial system on it. I take that down when it gets very windy. We'll talk a little bit about some of the winds that we get here. But I've got some slightly more robust verticals that I put up in storms, and that seems to work out okay. But I've played lots of HFCW. A member of the CW Ops Club, and some of you may know that that club has what they call a CWC 3 CWT sessions every Wednesday for an hour. There's from what is it, 13 to 14 GMT, and then 19 to 20. And then there's one the next morning, 03 to 04, which strangely enough I don't do. But quite enjoy those CW sessions, and also sometimes come on the 80-meter CW Club Championship events. Sorry, I don't really like the SSB ones. It's far too noisy for me, but I do enjoy the CW ones. So made a few improvements over the winter to the HF side of things. Got the dipole up, the button I was talking about. I seem to have become a home for retired valve amplifiers, which is rather lovely. An Alpha 86 headed my way, which is lovely amp. It's actually off air at the moment, and hopefully being repaired. But that's quite a nice amp, and actually another amp on the right hand side. It's one of Ross GW4VXE's home built amplifiers. He built it in 1972. It's got a pair of 3-500Zs in it, and it'll do a comfortable 400 watts, as you might imagine. And I was given that by a friend who'd got a solid state amp, and didn't want this great thing in his shack anymore. But I was more than happy to have that. So that's been great fun, and seem to work a bit more on HF now than I did before on CW. I was also lucky to have a rather special call sign. One of the things I noticed after I moved to Wales was that, particularly on CW, you might call somebody GW4VXE, quite a long call sign, and by the time you finish sending your call sign, they're halfway through working somebody else, and I don't send that slowly. But I was starting to think, well, what can I do about that? Well, there's of course there's the special calls. Some of you have probably got one of them that you can use in contests, but that wasn't kind of particularly what I wanted to do. And I remembered a conversation that I'd had many years ago when I lived in Cheltenham with a really good mate of mine, John G4PDQ. And John one day said to me, he said, "Tim, how do you have a conversation with a chap with an old call sign, basically along the lines of, when you snuff it, can I have your full sign?" And I said, "Well, you know this person quite well. I'm sure it'll be fine," and so on and so forth. Anyway, that conversation was had, and when Jack G4MM died, he left his call sign to John G4PDQ, which was lovely. Well, John G4PDQ isn't doing so much radio these days, and one day I was thinking about call signs and so on. I thought, I wonder if John uses I bet he doesn't use it. I wonder if he'd mind me using it. So I had a chat with John, and actually he said, no, I'd love you to have it and put it on the air. So consequently, I have the because we can't hold two call signs, it's constituted as a club call sign, as you might imagine. But I can use GW4MM whenever I want to, and use that on CW primarily, on HF. So that's been really nice to have, and it's been really interesting researching about Jack Miller, who was the original holder of G4MM. He was a voluntary interceptor in the war, and we know a little bit about what he did. And he worked at Arkley Lodge, which was the sort of central place where all the logs from the voluntary interceptors came to. And he was a discriminator, which meant that he went through all the logs and sort of worked out in conjunction with a bunch of other people, what was going to be interesting to pass up the line, and what they already had, and so on. So that's been a really interesting thing to sort of research as well. Anyway, what else have I been up to was something that's been quite interesting here. I told you a little bit about when I got going on FM satellites just after I moved here. Well, of course, there are linear transponders as well, which take a chunk of bandwidth on one band and split them out on another band. It's generally 2 meter and 70 sems, although Oscar 7 will take 10 meters up and put it on 2 meters down when it's in mode A. And I kind of resisted operating on them because you have to sort of work out the Doppler on both the uplink and the downlink, and fiddle and faff around and find yourself and all that sort of thing. And while I like satellite operating, it's it's not my sort of everything. If you do, but one day I was listening on one of the FM satellite channels, and I heard some really strong SSB, and it was really strong. It was breaking the squelch, and I could almost resolve what was being said. So I thought, well, I wonder if my vertical aerial might be good enough to make a few QSOs. And sure enough, it turns out that it is, especially when the satellite's low on the horizon. There's RS-44, which is a 2 meter up and 70 sems down. I can get into that very easily when the satellite's on the horizon, but receiving is a little bit more challenging. But when the satellite's close to the horizon, that works okay. Once it sort of goes up about 6 or 7 degrees, it can be harder to receive. But I found, particularly on CW, I've made some quite nice QSOs on RS-44. Mongolia, that was a bit of a surprise. A guy in Cuba, CO8TW, he's got a converted 2 meter, it's actually a taxi radio, which he's converted to send FM on, or FM CW, if you like, on 2 meters. And he's got an SDR receiver for the downlink on 70 sems. So it was a real joy to work him with quite a simple station. I worked Alaska, so that's that's actually been really good fun. And I also found with Oscar 7, which is a little bit, because it's Oscar 7 is really old, as you may or may not know. It was launched in the 1970s, I think, and actually the batteries on it gave up a long time ago, but they went open circuit. So when the satellite is in sunlight, the solar panels power Oscar 7 enough to make it work. As long as you don't put too much oomph on your to the satellite, which make yourself very strong in the receiver there, which will cause the satellite to run out of power and reboot, which doesn't go down very well with the other users. So you have to run quite low power on Oscar 7. So so the critical thing is to have a really good receiver. So I realised that I could actually use my 2-metre beam, my terrestrial beam, for the downlink on Oscar 7, and make sure that I could hear myself and just transmit a small signal on 70 SEMS, and that seems to have worked quite well. So so that's been exciting, and I try and get on for the low passes out over the sea, and work some DX. Here we go. Here's GW4VXE, Law of Antenna Efficiency, otherwise known as the Bodger's Charter. The only aerial which doesn't work at all is the aerial that you haven't put up. Remember, you heard that from me. And all I'm saying is that, lots of us would like to be perfectionist about the aerials that we put up and so on. But sometimes that's just not possible, and it's always better to put some sort of aerial up, even if it's a compromise. Why do I say this in regard to 70 megs? Well, I was lucky enough to be doing a review for an antenna analyzer. Why is that difficult to say? For an antenna analyzer a few months ago, and of course I stuck it on the V2000 vertical. And looked at the resonance on 2 meters, on 6 meters, on 70 SEMS. That was all fine, and I don't know why I even looked, but I looked on 4 meters, and sure enough, there was a bit of a dip there. I thought, well, that's interesting, and I happened to have a 4 meter FM handheld in the shack at the time, so I said to Richard GW1JFE, who's just down the road from me, "Oh, have a listen for me on 4 meters, see if you can hear me." And of course he couldn't, so I didn't really think very much more about it, thinking, oh well, it may be resonant there, but it's not radiating very well. That's fine. And then I suppose about three months ago or so, Jeff ON8NT, who writes to me for the PW column, he said, "Oh Tim, I've been playing with my V2000 vertical and my IC7300 on 4 meters on FT8, and I've been working some stations." And I thought, that's interesting. I should probably give that a go. And I've got one of the very early FT847s, which was horribly inefficient on 4 meters. I think it does about 10 watts if provoked, and it's not very sensitive either. But anyway, I thought, well, that's I'll try that on 4 meters with the V2000, and was surprised to make some QSOs on sporadic E. So so that was really good fun. So that's sort of made me think a little bit about 4 meters for next year, possibly with a slightly improved setup. But if you've got a V2000 and some 4 meter capability, perhaps on a rig like an IC7300, and you haven't tried 4 meters, maybe give it a go, see what happens. Probably not a lot of FT8 going on as far as I know at this time of year, but might be interesting during the E season next year. So getting towards the end, perhaps you'll be relieved to know, but one of the things that I've really got out of being here, although the aerial supports aren't particularly high, because we're about a mile and a half from the sea, so the winds can get quite lively here from time to time. So I like to be able to take down and put up aerials fairly quickly if I want to. But that's actually been marvellous, so that I can really experiment with aerials compared to what I had in Longworth, where everything was up on the roof and you needed ladders and stuff to put them up and so on. So that's been really good, and that's been something that I've really enjoyed, being able to put up aerials, pretty much at will. It's been interesting to continue the vertical horizontal polarization thing on 2 meters, and there's plenty of activity on both vertical polarization and horizontal. So that's been good. You gathered that the sea path is amazing down to EA8 and D4 when the band opens, but of course just small sea paths over to Ireland, sometimes you get tremendous enhancements over the sea, and I see that down to Cornwall, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. And in fact, it's quite interesting trying to work GM0HBK up in the Western Isles on 2 meters. We can pretty much hear each other any time if we beam at each other. Not really well. We're about 500k apart. I've got a slight obstruction in his direction, but it's amazing, just a little bit of an enhancement, and he'll come right up. So that's a really interesting path up the Irish Sea into Scotland. Of course, one of the things, I'm very lucky here. I've talked a little bit about the DSL noise if you're close to the phone cables, but the rural noise level is a lot lower here. But I don't take that for granted. When I moved to Oxfordshire, I remember, the noise level on 80 metres was about S3 or S4. But by the time I left, I think it was S8 to S9. So, I don't take that for granted. But I'm hoping with fibre broadband that we'll see some of that DSL noise go away. And as I've said, the low elevation passes on the satellites have been incredible. What else? Well, obviously it's nice to have some plans for the future. I told you that it's about 50 meters between the shack and the aerials. So I've got some heliacs now. A friend of mine, I was down with him the other day, and he occasionally decommissions masts and towers, and had some heliacs, and very kindly donated some of that. So I was going to run that out to the VHF aerials, and I should be able to have a 2 meter and 6 meters going at the same time next year. Need to fix 50 megs and a bit more oomph, I think, but we'll get to that in due course. Need to improve 70 megs, and of course 432 and maybe 1296 megs. That's all to be investigated still. And I do want to, there's growing interest in trying to make QSOs across the Atlantic on 2 meters. It's not going to be the easiest from up here, I don't think. But I'm very lucky with my path in that direction. We already know that a station in CT1 has been decoded in the Caribbean on 2 meters, and EA8 has worked into the Caribbean. So it doesn't take too much to conceive of a possible tropo opening in that direction. My guess is it's going to be in that direction rather than to Newfoundland or something like that, which is closer, but that sea tends to be colder. But who knows? I'm making stuff up. We just don't know. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that goes. And I feel really lucky of where I am, that I can play around with that a little bit. Yeah, I want to do a bit more GW4MM during HF contests, and I'll try and persuade some other people to come and operate, because I'm not too bothered about a lot of contest operating these days. But it's nice to see people having fun and making good scores and so on. So we've got plenty of room for aerials in the field at the back of the house, so we can put some stuff up. So I think that'll be fun. So maybe listen out for GW4MM portable in NFD one of these days. Anyway, it's not all about radio. We do quite a lot of other stuff here. I think you could see in the distance a polytunnel. Well, we put up a 24-foot by 14-foot polytunnel earlier in the year, and the picture that you can see on the right-hand side is pretty soon after we put it up and planted it up. We do no-dig gardening, which I don't know if some of you have come across, but the idea is that you you cover up the ground, so it might be grass or something like that, with cardboard, and then you put compost on top of that, and of course the cardboard gently rots down, but you can plant directly into the compost straight away, and it avoids you disturbing the soil and so on, and that's been really effective for us, both in the polytunnel and outside in the veg beds. So it's a shame you're not closer, because you could all take some tomatoes home this evening, because we've got absolutely loads of them. That's been really exciting, and we've grown some chilies in there, and have been making chili jam for the first time this year. So that's been fab. Lots of beans and so on. We plan to have chickens and bees. We've had both chickens and bees in the past, and we'd like to have that again. So something we have to be a little bit more careful of here with the chickens in particular is the fox, who we do sometimes see strolling down the middle of the field in the middle of the day. I think where we were before, we were never bothered by foxes with the chickens. I suspect they'd all moved into the urban areas where the pickings were easier. But out here the fox is pretty brazen, so we need to figure that out. But we will. Electric fencing and all that sort of stuff works. Should work. So that'll be good. Be lovely to have bees again. We had bees before, and in fact, one of the things, we had some honey left over from when we kept bees before, and we've actually got some mead on the go at the moment. So look forward to letting you know how that goes. My wife Julie is ordained interfaith minister, and so we have plans for people to come on retreats and quiet days up here. Despite what you may think about the radios and so on, it is actually quiet and peaceful up here, apart from when the wind's blowing. And so we've already had one or two guests who've been quite sort of stressed when they've arrived, and it's lovely to see them sort of unwind and so on as they stay here. So we want to do a little bit more about that, and I think that'll be really rewarding to do. Another big interest for both of us is the ancient landscape of the Preselles, and there's lots. I don't know how many of you know the area, but there's lots of sort of standing stones and stone circles and things like that around here. So we're loving learning about those and trying to understand, what this ancient landscape means, if we can figure that out, what some of these things are. So those are some of the things that keep us interested. So there we are. Not too much more to say, but that's a very quick spin through our first almost 2 years here in Pembrokeshire. It's a lovely place to be from a quality life point of view, and also a radio point of view. As you've probably gathered, there's lots that you can do. So with that, I will say see you on the air. The picture is actually from the shack window as the sun was setting one evening. But it'd be nice to work you on whatever bands we can. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you found it interesting. And if you do have any questions, I will be delighted to try and answer them.
Thank you very much, Tim. Can we just have a quick round of applause for Tim for tonight for coming on? Thank you very much. Now, if anyone has any questions, our club president, Nigel Roscoe, is going to chair them. So if you'd like to put your hands up, I'm sure Nigel will bring you in one at a time. Over to Nigel.
Okay. First of all, thanks, Tim. It was a great talk, that. It was very interesting. Obviously, I've been following your move over to the west of Wales, shall we say, for quite a long time. And I understand there's an interested party listening through the door as well, but there you go. So I think, yes, we've got a number of questions, I suspect, but I can think of a few likely candidates before I even start throwing it open to the masses, should we say. And in no particular order, I just wonder if, Karsten, do you have any questions for Tim?
No, not particularly. Not a good question.
I just wondered if it
really.
had been your kind of interest, should we say?
I was lucky enough to work D4 from up here as well.
Fantastic.
So, yeah, that was on 2020, I think, on the 1st of January. There was a good dropper opening down there, and it was also with a 9 element, just in a pole that was temporarily in the garden. Didn't expect much to happen dropper wise, but there they were. So that was
Fantastic. Yeah, no, it's really interesting. Some of the openings, you know, they're just sort of marine paths, and you just get marine ducting. And if you're more than about 5-10 miles away from the coast, there's nothing, which is always great for us. But it's actually lovely to see the openings going further inland, and lots of people making QSOs, and that's always really nice.
Okay, right, Carsten. I think there was another one just on my screen, sitting to my right is Evan, and I'm quite sure Evan would like to raise a question as well.
Yeah, just quickly, thanks, Nigel. Yeah, thanks for the talk, Tim. That's great. Yeah, just on the ducks that you get to EA8, etc. Do they show up regularly on the Hepburn charts? You know, they sort of predict those sort of openings.
Yeah, the Hepburn site is really good for that, for looking at those sort of openings, and potentially for the transatlantic openings as well. It's always interesting to look and see if it's kind of joining up. But you're right, yeah, the Hepburn chart is really good for looking at those, and is remarkably accurate as well. It's really interesting, because you probably know that I think you can sort of run it through a period of time, and it updates every 6 hours, up to about a week ahead. Obviously, it probably gets a little bit less accurate as you get a little bit further into the future. But it's amazing to actually cycle an opening through and get a sense of when the band might open, and it is really accurate. I guess most of you may have come across it, but in case you haven't, if you Google William Hepburn tropospheric forecast, it'll take you to a website, and it gives you tropospheric forecasts for particular areas of the world. I think ours is the one that Evan and I are talking about is northwestern Europe, but you can look at other different areas of the world as well. So that's a really nice site. There's also a very similar one, F5 Lima Echo November, has a similar sort of tropo type forecast, and there's also thank you, Carsten. Yeah, just there's also a site whose URL I can't remember, which takes data from APRS, and it works quite well as well. So it actually looks at the paths that are being plotted on APRS, and looks at the paths which are much longer. I think it's primarily based in the States, but it does work over here as well. And if I miraculously remember the URL by the end of the evening, I'll let you know. But if anyone's interested, drop me a line, and I'll find it for you. So yeah, really good question, and I think definitely well worth keeping an eye on the Hepburn chart, or the F5LEN chart, because it does give some really good clues.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Anything else, Evan?
Just on that, I mean, just with regarding the transatlantic ducks potentially, I mean, would that be roughly following the Gulf Stream, sort of the more sort of moist, warm water and moist air above it? Would that be what you'd expect?
Feels like it. I mean, who knows? But yeah, I guess that's what I would expect to happen. But it won't happen like we expect, I'm sure.
Probably not.
So yeah, I think so, probably. And it's really interesting to see people starting to look at the transatlantic path. I've been really interested that Thanks, Andrew. I've been really interested to look at people looking at band 2 FM reception across the Atlantic as well, and people starting to see some results there. There's a guy in Ireland who's quite regularly he's heard North American FM stations at least on a number of occasions. So I think that's really interesting. So it's really great that people are starting to point their beams in those directions, which I don't think has happened before. So yeah, probably the Gulf Stream, but who knows?
Great, Evan. Wonderful. Right. Okay. We've got a couple of Peters tonight. Normally it's several Nigels, but this time it's a couple of Peters. So I think Peter, BCG, I wonder if you want to ask any questions?
Yeah, I'm just saying, I presume you can hear me. I've been having troubles with my mic. Am I live?
Yeah, it's fine, Peter.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Okay, fine. Yeah, brilliant talk, and a lot of interesting bits there. Delighted that you chose to go to West Wales rather than South East Cornwall. But the one thing you didn't mention, and it doesn't necessarily need that much high power these days, had any thoughts about moon bounce? Because again, in specific occasions, you've got that fantastic sunset and therefore moonset to the west of you, and with some quite small aerials, certainly on 2 meters, you'd be very successful, and you'd work the biggest stations on 6 meters moon bounce. Any thoughts?
Well, thank you. That's encouraging. It has sort of crossed my mind. One of the things that I, when I came here, that I thought actually I would really like to do, was some of my friends were playing around with sort of really low power movements on 77. So I thought, well, that sounds kind of fun, but I hadn't really sort of got that far yet because I hadn't done anything on 77s. But I probably, once I improve the feeder out to the antenna on 2 meters, I think that would be really interesting to try. And I might have a word with you, Peter, about some good candidates to try with on 2 meters, because I think that would be really exciting. But I must admit, I hadn't thought about 6 meters. I thought I was probably a bit underpowered for that. So I have to try and improve things. But it would be interesting to think about some possibilities there. As you say, the path out over the sea should work really well.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I mentioned 6 meters is that GW is particularly underrepresented on the moon at the moment. So you would actually be, that call sign would work again for you.
Okay. Oh, well, that's good to know, actually. I'll have to start working on that then. Thank you.
I wonder if Julie wants to know that.
That's my 2 penners.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Okay, I mentioned 2 Peters. I wonder if Peter PTB would like to ask a question as well.
No questions, but thanks for a great talk, and I'm really envious of your site, especially the way you can put aerials up and down.
Yeah.
Really envious of that. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't take that for granted. We are very lucky, and it's an incredibly different experience. So yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, so I've gone through the 4 names that I could think of. May have some questions. Is there anybody else like to ask Tim a question tonight? I was thinking perhaps maybe Tom would like to inquire as to how his tomatoes are doing.
Yeah, I was going.
Tom, we can't hear you. Tom, Mike. Tom, we can't hear you.
I think you might be on mute.
Are you on mute, Mike? Tom?
Yeah, try that then. How's that?
That's better.
Yeah, lovely.
Okay, right. Yeah, no, I was just looking at your polytunnel actually and admiring that as much.
You might be somehow.
Basically, apart from the fact you've got an idyllic spot out there actually on the coast, the only thing I would think about that would be the weather actually, and some of the antennas you want. You'll need to be very careful actually with corrosion and things like guying in the winter time. I guess that would be an issue. Back to you, Tim.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. and anything corrodes here really quickly, you know, particularly car exhausts we've noticed already. But you know, and anything will corrode. So yeah, I think antenna supports is something to think about.
Yeah.
But you know, fortunately, what I'm doing at the moment is fairly well supported, so that's okay.
Do you find as well though that things like screw joints on cable ends and stuff like that, you get electrolysis, different metals and electrolysis, real problem.
Yeah, it's really interesting actually.
Salt water, you can't beat it.
I've noticed a couple of times, you know, the sort of HF antenna, you think, well, it's not working quite right. You go out. Oh, okay, right.
That's right. Goes high resistance. Actually, you get oxides and various chemical salts on the actual joint, and it doesn't half reduce the efficiency of antennas and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can tell that Tom's a chemist in this joint.
I also have experience of very rough weather, actually, from where I come from. So.
Yeah, I can imagine. No, I mean, you also mentioned rough weather in conjunction with the polytunnel. You know, it's something that we wanted to put up here, but it does get horrendously windy up here at times, and
yeah. What you want to do is plant a low hedge around it. Actually, that'll protect it. Actually, something like you know.
We stuck it behind the house.
Yes.
So hopefully that will help. But we got some proper people as opposed to improper people to help us put it up, and they put, you know, a couple of bags of postcrete under each support, as opposed to the sort of regular support and so on. And the polythene's really tight, so
that's
fingers
the trick,
crossed.
Actually, in fact, you don't let the polythene vibrate because it becomes brittle and then it shatters, and before you know it, you've got shreds instead of a polytunnel.
Yeah. So
but anyway, you grow tomatoes and stuff, and that I was interested in the soil you were using actually there, because you're using a non-tillage system. Just cover it with cardboard. Let the cardboard rot down, you put a bit of compost on the top, and basically you just let the roots grow in. Actually, that's quite a modern method of sort of no ploughing type agriculture. They're trying to go that way. They say that is actually better than deep digging and stuff like that, because you actually keep the nutrition and the fiber and stuff in the top of the soil where the roots actually like to grow.
Yeah, I mean, my wife Julie knows a lot more about it than I do, but I know she recommends Charles Dowding as a huge proponent of this method of no-dig gardening, and it certainly seems to work really well. And one of the very appealing features of it is that it's almost instant gardening. Is that, you know, we've sort of rolled up with you know, all our cardboard. So all the Amazon boxes that ever come here, which is quite a few, as you can imagine, is, you know, they go off into the barn, and you know, the big pieces of cardboard. And then when we want to make a new veg bed, well, we get all those, you know, cut the tape off, split the boxes down, take it up there, and put the cardboard down. If we're lucky, it's not a windy day, and then, you know, put some compost on top of it, and then you can plant straight into that.
Correct.
So
that's right. Yes.
You know, it's a fantastic way of getting going.
Absolutely brilliant. Yes. I was I'm not actually much of a VHF type person myself, actually, although I have done it in the past. But basically, I'll have to look out for you if you decide to do contesting on 80 meters or anything like that on CW and stuff. I'll watch out for your call sign.
I'm quite often on CW. So, and Julie just said she's happy to answer any gardening questions.
All right. I won't trouble her tonight, actually, but thank her anyhow. Okay, back to you, Nigel.
Yeah, that's great. I thought you might have some questions on that score, Tom, because Tom's got a greenhouse with quite a few tomatoes hanging from it.
I'm sick of them now. I'm actually completely tomatoed out. I can't cope with any more tomatoes this year. Actually, I was just looking. I've got about probably about 4 or 5 pounds still on some plants outside. They'll never ripen now. They've got to come in. So
we've only just finished last year's tomato soup.
I was
All
just
right.
about to say we're looking for
Right.
tomato soup at the contest group again, but there you go. Well done,
But
Tom.
we've got a freezer full.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
I think you know where not to send it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Same with beans.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Looking at the group we've got left, have we got any other questions for Tim? Perhaps not gardening this time round. Although Julie is there in the background. Yeah, go on.
Yeah,
Em.
yeah, we can.
Just quick question.
And
do
you
you do
haven't even
any
got a
sort of-
garden either.
I don't have much of a garden, so I'm not questioning about it. Just go to Lidl's, easy enough for me. Just wondering, do you do any stuff other than FT8 on the VHF and up bands, and also, and I guess it's a question for Peter BCG as well. Are both of you use Oscar 100?
I know Peter uses Oscar 100, so I'll let him talk about that. And he's made some really interesting contacts. I've not done that so far. No, primarily my interest on VHF is FT8. I'm not interested in shouting at people. Sorry, I'm happy to make CW QSOs, but that doesn't happen very often. So yeah, primarily FT8. Although quite happy to sort of locally make FM QSOs, and actually it's quite good fun listening on the FM repeaters when you get a bit of ducting over the sea, and I can work down into Cornwall, into Ireland on FM. So that can be good fun. And I've got one or two friends who will call me on FT8 on 2 meters, and I know if I go down to 144050 after that, they'll be there on CW. So that can be good fun. So yeah, that's a little bit. But yeah, I'll let Peter talk about QO100 because he's had a really good time with that, I think.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Yeah, I kind of been a life member of AMSAT since the AMSAT USA, that is, since the 70s. But I had a gap of 30 or 40 years after coming back from H44 in the mid 80s. I didn't really do much satellite work, and I got talked into having a go on QO100 because there was the expedition down in Botswana, and I worked them on the moon, and they were on QO100, so I cobbled together a station just to work them, and that was very nearly 2 years ago now, I think, and I got hooked, unfortunately. It's great fun because it's geostationary. You don't have to mess around pointing your aerials at it. A couple of watts and an old Sky dish, and you'll get into it, and you'll certainly hear it on a simple SDR, and again an LNB from an old Sky system.
This is something we may be able
Yeah,
to
I'm kind of
talk
hooked.
to you and to Tim as well from the
Yeah,
club.
well, sorry, go on.
I was going to say that may be a way of talking to you and also Tim, from the club.
Yeah, I did actually suggest that at one stage, that we ought to, because there's one or two people I know in the club who are on QO100, and we could actually try and have a bit of a net there. What I should hold my hand up and confess and say, halfway through Tim's talk, you may have noticed my video went off for about a minute, and that was because I saw a spot on my other PC here that there was a station portable in 4 Oscar / HB9 ERD, I think it was, on QO100. So I muted my audio, muted my video, went up on SSB on the satellite, worked a new country and a new square, said
Montenegro.
thank you, came back.
That Montenegro?
Yeah.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
That's excellent, Peter. I wouldn't have wanted it any other way.
What's the real, of course, is actually working down to the horizon or just below the horizon. There are stations now trying to push the boundaries of that. I managed to encourage my old friend Bo, who's OX3LX, on his trip to Greenland to set up a station for QO100. That's right on the edge of the footprint, and he gave well, he's the only possible North American continent contact because he's right on the edge of the footprint. America's out of it. Likewise, there are lots of people down in South America, but also out in Asia, out into Bandung in Malaysia. Again, right on the edge of the footprint. So it's possible to get work to all continents, including Antarctica, on the satellite, which is good fun. Even though, as I always say, it's only a repeater after all. Back to you, Evan.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously you're getting some sort of link. If it's over the horizon, you get maybe some refraction, but also some scatter as well, which directs it to the, once it gets into the footprint area. Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for that, both.
Cheers.
Thanks for taking over the talk, chaps. Any other questions tonight for Tim? I can't see any hands raised. There was. Oh, hang on. Was that something? No. So you haven't seen any hands raised. Okay, well, I'll put it back to Neil to finish it off. But thanks, Tim. Great talk. It's great to see some more pictures of where you are as well. And also, I shall hopefully see you sometime in the morning.
Yes, great talk.
At about 10 o'clock. Back to you, Neil.
Yes, great talk. I will build another house there and rent it out as a radio cottage. I really would.
He's got a barn.
Yeah, coming up this week, Sunday, 10:30, 28.550. You've got the 10-metre net at 10:30. And on the 19th, you've got a Salia Communications talk with Nick M0NCZ. So they're coming up this week. Well, not this week. One's this week, one's on the 19th. So if you are free on Sunday, do call into the 10-metre net. Don't all jump at once, please.
I was just going to say thanks for reminding me because I had forgotten.
Had you?
I've forgotten.
But
So,
yeah, good.
Has
It's
anyone
the
got?
RSU, it's the HF convention this weekend as well, isn't it?
Yes, there's an online convention, isn't there, on Saturday, I think.
Yeah.
Is there a contest on at the end of the month?
There is, because Tom, with the other lads, went down to Avro. Was it today, Tom?
Yeah, we went down, myself, Dave, Bates, Bernard, Peter Ridley, and we had a scout around, in fact, and looked in some of the buildings there. Bernard can talk more about the actual contact he had with the people in there. But I think, in fact, it was a good time to go because I got a chance to assess the sort of state of the field that we were going to go into in relation to the fact that Kieran's going to have to reverse the trailer mast onto it when we come to pull the Worcester mast down there. And I think it'll be okay. Actually, he should be able to cope with the Land Rover. So I think we'll be all right, actually. And there's electricity supply, and there's a nice warm concrete building we can go into. And if everything works all right, we should be able to have quite a good weekend. Actually, that's the 30th and the 31st of October. CQ Worldwide SSB.
We've been. It's a temporary home whilst the farm is not available. So
that is correct.
You chaps going down for the event at the beginning of September helped us out there because it basically meant that we got an alternative site to be able to use, and plus the fact it's just around the corner from Bernard and Peter.
Yeah, it's a bloody nightmare to find the place. Actually, in fact, it normally causes a GPS. These sat navs in the cars, in fact, they go absolutely berserk. The first day I went down there with my sat nav. In fact, I could see the bomber, but I couldn't see the road end, and the sat nav told me it was completely wrong.
It's still part of the runway there, remember? Back to you, Neil.
Right, is that everyone now finished for the evening?
I think so.
Yeah.
Big thank
One
you.
final comment.
Go on, Peter.
One final comment is that runway that you were looking for or finding yourself on. As a kid, I used to go down that lane by the side of the church to the far end of the runway and lie underneath the edge of the runway as the Vulcans took off. I can remember once throwing up after they did because they were body shattering, but it was good fun. I was about 8 or 9.
Right, I can imagine. Yes. I don't think the Vulcan that's there will be doing much flying these days, actually, not unless it's been converted to VTO.
Well, they have recently just painted it again, so
That'll make all the difference.
yeah, they've done it was falling apart at one stage, but they're destined to get an Avro Shackleton from the museum in Manchester, because that's closing. So the Shackleton that's hanging from the ceiling there is going over to Avro at Woodford, but don't know where they're going to put it, mind.
Right.
There you go.
Yeah.
Right, back to you, Neil, again.
Last minute questions? No. Big thank you for Tim for coming on. Very much appreciated, Tim. Thank you very much for everyone at SRS. I will get Heather to send you a copy of the recording before we send it out to the members for your official say-so, if you don't
It's
mind.
fine.
So
But
thank you
it's
everyone
fine.
for coming on. It's been great, a fantastic talk, I must say. So thank you, Tim.
Yeah.
And have a great week, everyone. Stay safe and let's get on the radio and let's get talking.
Good
Stay
man.
safe. Have fun. Cheers, Tim.
Thank you for coming. I'm going to stop
Bye.
the recording now. 7-3, everybody.
Yeah.